Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the BBC Home Service bringing you the latest news from the home front and abroad. I'm your host, Reginald Smythe-Bottomley, here to keep you informed and entertained. Hold on to your hats and monocles because it's time for the news. Tonight, we begin with the latest from the war effort. It seems our brave lads have been making quite the fuss in the Mediterranean. Reports indicate that the Royal Navy has once again shown Jerry who's boss. Admiral Cunningham has sent the Italian fleet running faster than a waiter at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Our brave allies on the Eastern Front have been busy giving the Axis powers what for. Reports from the Soviet Union indicate that the Red Army has been making significant advances, pushing the Germans back faster than a greased weasel on a slippery slope. Comrade Ivan Ivanovich, when asked how they managed such feats, simply replied, "With lots of potatoes and sheer willpower." Ah, the simple pleasures. Meanwhile, across the pond, our American friends continue to bewilder and bemuse us with their peculiar ways. They've introduced something called fast food, where one can supposedly receive a meal in less than 5 minutes. Back here, we're lucky if we can boil a kettle in that time, what with the rationing. They've also got a chap named Bing Crosby who croons into a microphone and makes the ladies swoon. On a more serious note, we turn to the skies over Britain. Our valiant RAF pilots continue to defend our shores with unmatched courage. Squadron leader Bigglesworth reports that they've downed another 12 enemy aircraft. When asked how he felt about the news, he simply replied, "Jolly good show." Well, indeed it is, Biggles, indeed it is. Back on home soil, let's take a look at the state of our economy. It seems bartering has become all the rage. Mrs. Gladys Bumfrey from Downing Street traded her finest lace doily for 2 tins of Spam and a half-used jar of Marmite. And Mr. Alfred Coggins has set up a makeshift marketplace in his front garden, offering everything from soap to socks. It's like the Harrods of haggling. And in a rather inventive twist, the good people of Puddington-on-the-Marsh have repurposed their duck pond into a camouflage training ground. Locals now take part in what they call duck and cover drills, where participants practice hiding behind the unsuspecting waterfowl. The ducks, naturally, are less than amused. In other news, rationing continues to be the word of the day. Housewives across the nation have become quite creative with their cooking. Yesterday, Mrs. Beatrice Hoppington from East Sussex reportedly made a delightful pie using only turnips, a bit of lard, and what we suspect might have been an old shoe. Delicious, I'm sure. Now, on to fashion. The latest craze sweeping the nation is make, do, and mend. Our lovely ladies are taking old curtains and turning them into the most fabulous frocks. I must say, there's nothing quite as stylish as a dress that once shaded Aunt Mildred's parlour. Speaking of style, chaps, don't think we've forgotten about you. The Ministry of Information has released a pamphlet on how to keep your trousers looking sharp even when fabric is scarce. The key, it seems, is starch. Lots and lots of starch. You'll be able to stand to attention without even trying. And now for a bit of lighter fare. Reports from the countryside tell us that the annual village fete in Upper Bottomley-on-the-Wold was a smashing success. Highlights included the vicar winning the egg and spoon race and Mrs. Puddington's prized piglet, Percy, taking home the blue ribbon in the livestock show. Percy has become quite the local celebrity and is expected to release his memoirs next spring. Our friends at the Ministry of Invention have unveiled the latest marvel to aid in our wartime efforts. It's a contraption known as the radar. Yes, you heard it right, radar. This miraculous device helps our forces detect incoming enemy aircraft before they arrive, giving our boys the upper hand. It's like having a crystal ball, but with more wires and fewer fairies. Next, let's turn to the world of entertainment. The cinema continues to be a beacon of light in these dark times. The latest blockbuster, Mrs. Miniver, has everyone buzzing. It's a tale of courage, resilience, and roses. Quite literally. If you haven't seen it yet, I suggest you grab your gas mask and head to the nearest picture house post-haste. And speaking of entertainment, the BBC is proud to announce a new radio comedy series, It's That Man Again. Starring the inimitable Tommy Handley, it's guaranteed to tickle your funny bone and lift your spirits. Remember, laughter is the best medicine, second only to a good cuppa. On to sports. The latest cricket match between the Kent Cavaliers and the Sussex Stalwarts was a nail-biter, with the Cavaliers clinching victory by a single run. Our correspondent, Basil Willoughby, reports that the crowd's enthusiasm was matched only by their confusion over the rules. One spectator was overheard saying, "I haven't the foggiest what's happening, but isn't it smashing fun?" And in a remarkable display of British ingenuity, a local football team has adapted to the times by playing in gas masks. The result is a game that's part sport, part slapstick. With players tripping over their own feet and mistaking teammates for opponents, it's a spectacle not to be missed. The final score? Nobody knows, but everyone left with a smile. Now let's check in on the weather with our resident meteorologist, Percival Puddleworth. Percival, old chap, what can we expect in the coming days?
Thank you, Reginald. Good evening, listeners. Well, it looks like we're in for a bit of a soggy spell. Rain, rain and more rain, I'm afraid. But let's look on the bright side. It's perfect weather for staying indoors and knitting those essential woolen socks for our troops. Back to you, Reginald.
Thank you, Percival. As always, your forecasts are as cheerful as a wet weekend in Blackpool. In local news, the Women's Institute of Little Whinging has organised a knitting bee to support our troops. Reports indicate that over 1,000 socks have been produced, with one particularly enthusiastic member, Mrs. Gertrude Pocklethwaite, managing to knit an entire jumper using nothing but leftover wool and a stiff upper lip. Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Feeling under the weather? Try Dr. Fotheringay's Fortifying Tonic. One sip and you'll feel like a new man or woman. Dr. Fotheringay's, because everyone needs a little boost now and then. Let's end with a delightful tale from the heart of the countryside. The village of Bumblethorpe has come together to celebrate a unique annual event, the Great Bumblethorpe Snail Race. Competitors carefully select and train their snails, decorating their shells with miniature Union Jacks and cheering them on with great enthusiasm. This year's winner, Speedy Shelley, crossed the finish line in record time, just under 3 hours. And lastly, we have a rather moving story of wartime ingenuity and community spirit. The town of Little Pidlington has built a makeshift cinema in an old barn, showing films to boost morale. Last Friday, they screened The Wizard of Oz to a packed audience. Young and old alike were entranced by the magic of Technicolor, and for a few hours, the worries of the world melted away. And that, dear listeners, concludes tonight's broadcast. As we navigate these challenging times, let's not forget the importance of humor, resilience, and, of course, a good cup of tea. We'll be back tomorrow with more news, more laughs, and more reasons to keep that stiff upper lip. This is Reginald Smythe Bottomley signing off. Good night, and God save the King.